Hey, everybody, and we are live. So, welcome everybody. Fun kind of Tuesday night tasting session here. So, got some special guests. Gonna have a lot of fun with this one. So, joining us tonight, of course, Jordan and Eric, the other two Breaking Bourbon guys. So, how you guys doing tonight?
Good. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to this chat. It's going to be a real fun one. I think we got a good group of people to drink and talk with, and this should be really good.
For sure. Blake, Seelbach, and Bourbonr, how are you? We seem like we do this quite often together.
I know it's every other night. They get us in their living room, talking bourbon. So always fun to be here and to catch up with the Barrell guys. And yeah, this pick turned out fantastic. So yeah, congrats on that. And yeah, excited to talk Barrell Craft Spirits for a little while.
Yeah, for sure. And we got two of the three folks from the Single Barrel Club who helped us with the pick, Bryce and Robin. So how are you guys doing? Unfortunately, Cole couldn't make it tonight.
Doing well. Thanks for having us. It was great making the pick, and I'm going to enjoy hearing you guys talk about it.
Yeah, really excited to be here, and thank you so much for great bourbon.
Yeah, and finally, and I'm going to turn over the floor to these guys here, is Joe Beatrice, founder of Barrell Craft Spirits, Barrell Bourbon, Stellum, you've heard that name, Tripp Stimson, just helps put together some of the most insane blends. Obviously, I think everybody knows Barrell is just the king of blending. So super excited to have you guys on. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're great. Thanks for having us.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and so we're gonna talk a little bit. I mean, we've got our pick, which is a private blend, the Breaking Barrel blend. We're gonna sip that a little bit, but before we do, kind of turn it over to you guys, Joe and Tripp. Just kind of give us some of what is Barrell Bourbon? What is Barrell Craft Spirits?
Oh, we should be able to handle this in about 10 or 15 seconds. Well, taking it from the top, we are blenders. We source and blend a wide variety of whiskeys, rums, bourbons, and ryes. We are primarily we do batch bourbons, which are limited release bourbon blends, and we do about 4 or 5 of those a year. That's the bottle. It looks like this. The Barrell Craft Spirits product. We're here to talk about the private release, the bourbon private release. So within our portfolio of products, aside from the batch bourbons, we have a number of private release products we put together, which are unique blends, and they're in the whiskey, rum, and bourbon categories. This one and our bourbon blends our bourbon special releases are not finished. They're simply blends that we have put together of various mash bills and ages. Each one is unique, and we do blend these one barrel at a time. And sometimes we do a larger. We may do a larger batch for a particular one, but generally speaking, these are all unique barrels that are, once they're gone, they are, and sold, they're gone. What else can I tell you about us? We have a number of other products that have a finish. We have 3 products: Dovetail, Armida, and Seagrass, and maybe we'll talk about those later. And this year, we've been busy. This year, we launched another brand, Stellum Bourbon and Rye. And I'm sure we can get to that later. But Tripp,
awesome.
So Tripp, tell us about the blending. I mean, tell us a little bit about that process, because, certainly as far as blending goes, blending historically in bourbon has been, I think very different than how Barrell is doing it. I kind of liken it more to the blending in Scotch, in that sense. So kind of give a little bit of that, what goes into the blending that you guys do.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth noting too that, when we put blends together, we really have sort of a worldwide pantry to choose from. all of these different distilleries in and of themselves create their individual products. They use a certain yeast strain, a certain grain bill, and a certain type of barrel profile, and they create these unique products. Blending allows us to leverage across all of these different types of processes that create unique bourbons and whiskeys and products in and of themselves, and leverage those complexities and bring them together to create these complex whiskeys that would not have otherwise existed. I think an easy way for me to sort of say that is, we'll say that the diversity in whiskey is lending itself to complexity in blends. So we take all of these interesting whiskeys that have components that we find unique independently and bring them together in such a way that those independent components complement each other in an overall blend.
And I guess the other thing that we should probably mention is this is what we do for a living. We blend products all the time, all day long, and it's surprisingly rigorous and involving process. We'll do hundreds of combinations for a product or a blend. Sometimes they come easier, but a lot of times it's a very detailed and sort of methodical process. And part of it is just because you like 2 whiskeys or 4 whiskeys or 3 whiskeys, putting them together isn't necessarily going to create something good. And I mean, I'm always amazed by this. Always amazed by this. We did a release recently with the first time we did anything with a wheated bourbon, and the delimiting factor on this was the wheated bourbon, because the wheated bourbon is sort of a softer, flatter texture and flavor, and it when it combines with other bourbons, it can mute a lot of the nice notes we're trying to bring forward. So what we found in doing this was, and I've told the story a couple times, and I'm still blown away by it. Relative numbers, maybe the entire batch was 5,000 gallons. We were playing around at the end with less than 5 gallons of the wheated whiskey, and we were putting it in these giant tanks with our giant agitators, that slow-moving agitators. We were putting it in less than a gallon at a time. And because in the lab, when we do our test blends in the lab, we knew that there was a critical threshold in which it really flattened it. It was imperceptible. It just happened. So we step our way up to it, and it was just this, tense, dramatic music in the background, wanting to make sure that we get it right.
And then drop by drop at the end, right?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. And the Tripp knows, like, we know at this point from experience exactly when to stop, because one more and it will then you have to go back and readjust everything. So that's why the sizes of our batches are always different, because when it's there, we stop. We know, and we just stop. And so if it's 5,000 cases or 9,000 cases, not 6,000 cases or 5,000, not yet.
Yeah.
Or 3,000, we know. Anyway.
I'm hearing like at that final. Sorry, I'm hearing at that final stage, like, just turn on the Jaws music as you're doing those last few drops. Like, did it?
It's tense.
Yeah.
You don't want to be around when we're doing that. It's
thousands of gallons of bourbon and thousands of dollars. It's like, we pull this up, we're screwed. No.
Yeah. Every time a truck leaves our place, it's like,
Yeah.
full of finished product. It's a scary thing to get it to the warehouse. Once it's there, it's like, phew.
Is there a reason why that specific, the wheat whiskey or as opposed to others plays that big of a role at such a small level, or just, is it, I guess there's science behind it somewhere, but what's causing that?
Tripp, why don't you speak to that? But the first answer is it happens a lot. That's just a very easy one to point to, because it was so clear that it was the wheat that was the limiting factor. A lot of times this is a different mash bill, but Tripp can answer.
I think so much of how the limiting factor reacts with the total overall blend is going to depend what's actually in that total overall blend. If we were to reproduce that blend using different characteristics and use the same wheat whiskey, we might not see that same interaction. It might take a little more before we find that limiting factor than it did in that particular blend. So there's really no cut and dried answer to that, Blake. Yeah, I mean, it would change. It would change.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have dabbled a little bit in playing around with it. I know, Ryan and Kenny have a bit, and they for a long time they were always like, "What's the secret? What's the secret? What's the secret?" I'm like, the secret, as long as not that many people are listening, is we make it taste good.
Yeah. Knowing when to stop.
Patent pending.
Oh, man.
It's funny because there is, aside from a methodology that we use, that's really the key. And Tripp, Nick, and we all blend together and we know each other's palates well. And and Tripp and I, since we've been doing this for a long time, there are faults that really react that Tripp's palate picks up, and there are ones that my palate picks up. And so it's really worked that by going with that. If we get anything that we don't like, you can stop it. Or also there are things that we both like that we want to tease out of the blends too. Like we love those tropical fruit. We just love the tropical fruit notes. The sweet marshmallow s'mores flavor and all those. And so when we get those, we try to make them. We try to bring them to the forefront.
Now, you guys, do you have at least regard to barrel bourbon batches, do you have a hard timeline where, every 2 months you're trying to come out with a new batch, or a third month? And then, is there times where you just aren't nailing the batch and you're like, all right, we're not going to hit this deadline, we're going to have to delay it? Like how many, you go through 100 different, blends and they're not working?
Yeah. Yes. And yes. We have multiple blending projects going on at any given time. And sometimes, as we're working through, let's take a step back. And so if we're doing a batch, we start with we whiteboard everything. So we have whiteboard concepts of ideas of things we want. And then we look at our inventory, which Tripp was referencing. Over the years, we built up a pretty extensive inventory of different distilleries, ages, mash bills, states, everything, and so we know the characteristics of most of them. We don't know, we can figure out pretty quickly. So the simplest way I think of it is we try to get to 3 or 4 core components, and getting to those 3 or 4 core components require a lot of blending on each of those separately. So we call those the component parts. So we might blend 50 barrels of different types to get to one component. Once we get to the final 4, we then start doing those in different proportions in different iterations. And so sometimes if either a component doesn't fit, we'll put it aside. We don't waste anything. I mean, we can absolutely use it something else, because that profile may complement something different. We don't have any trouble. Our deadlines. We're always. We never miss anything, but we cut it close.
So one question came up is, how long does it usually take to blend a bourbon batch? And I know you kind of described the detail, but what's that kind of look like from a timeline standpoint, hours and so forth?
I mean, sometimes we can get lucky and it can be a matter of days or a week. And then sometimes it can take as long as several weeks or a month. And I think a lot of that is sort of how the whiskey that we're using interacts with each other, and where we have to go to find the missing components. How long it takes us to figure out what's missing, and then where do we go to find what's missing, and then how does that actually interact with the batch as a whole, where we are. And those processes take a little bit of extra time and blending in the lab.
Got it. So one of the other questions we had too was, before we dive in, and we have a fun one because I do want to talk about the sticker and the concept behind it and everything else. But before we dive into that, one more question. So Philip wants to know, just what's the story behind Seagrass?
Yeah, that's I love the story. It's this is a product that we had a name for way before we had the product. And because I love the beach and just sort of like we were thinking of, like the grass you see in the sand dunes and the beach. The only problem is that's not what seagrass is. Actually, seagrass is a kind of seaweed. But I think you get the spirit of it. It's evocative of sort of like, and it lends itself naturally to a rye because of the salinity of the rye, and it just felt like the right blend to put together. So the seagrass is the third one of three ongoing products that we produce and then sell, which is Dovetail, Armida, and Seagrass. One's a whiskey, one's a bourbon, and one's a rye. And Seagrass is the rye component, and it is. Thank you. It is. It's a blend of many different ryes, including some Canadian rye. And we knew that we played around with apricot finished whiskey last year. There is no apricot barrel. We take. I think you guys are really familiar with that. It's apricot brandy. We conditioned a bourbon barrel with it, and it really brought forward some really great notes. So we knew that was something we wanted to play around with. But we're really conscious of putting finishes in products because we want it to be very subtle. We want you to almost not taste the blending component. We want it to elevate the whiskeys and the interaction with the other components. So to temper that, we have a relationship with Martin. Well, there's only really it's one agricole producer, Martinique, and we don't sell the product, but we use it to condition barrels. And the thing about agricole is, different from rum, is it's very dry, very very rich, and it was a great complement to the sweetness of the apricot finish. And then to complicate it even further, this was a lot of blending. Then to complicate it, we use Madeira cask, Cercial Madeira cask, which is there are 4 types of Madeira. And Cercial is one of them. So it's a really complicated finish blend, and so we blend some of the ryes first together before we finish it. Then we use some of the ryes without being blended in the finish, and then we blend all of those together in different stages. So it takes a while to produce this, and we're really happy with the results of it. We think it's just when we hit it, we felt like it was really dead on.
And you wanted to do the rye? Was there a reason you went for that instead of the bourbon? Did you test the bourbon, or was it rye right from the start?
It was rye right from the start. Because we wanted to produce, the intent was to have a rye product that stood alongside the whiskey and the bourbon, but it also I think these finishes would not necessarily work with a bourbon because it'd be just overwhelming. It'd be too much with the corn.
Yeah, I've only been through 2 bottles myself, so I'm still trying to make sure you nailed that finish. I was still reeling it in.
Going to need a third. And just from blending 2 barrels or 3 barrels and the range you get from that and how difficult it is to get a good end result. I mean, to take all the things that are in that and put it together and make it so well executed is, I mean, I got to think people are just intimidated by even attempting to do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that, I mean, I imagine you're like, how small of a scale are you starting with a project like that? I mean, are we talking, because that's pretty tough when you're talking about all the components to be at like 100 mLs, and are you starting that small, or is it like, hey, a gallon? And
yeah, we are, because we do, we do lots of test blends in the lab, and those are all on a small scale. And then because of the complexity of this, we had to do it on a larger scale in components. So we started everything doing, a couple hundred milliliters at a time. Right. I mean, when we're putting the components together. And then and one of the things we also learned early on, especially me, and I think Tripp would say the same thing, is that we have surfaces, a glass that we can write on, because the second I put a glass on, I forgot what it is. And after we've been blending for a little bit, it's like, which one was that? So we all make notes on the table. This is plus 1%, and this 96.35, whatever it is. And so we have to keep track of it is really complicated for me anyway. But
and then even after we do all that work in the lab, it's unfortunately not a linear scale up process in the blending tank. I mean, it's not like it's not one for one. We don't just take this math problem and go out there and dump these barrels and magically we've created this product. It's all done incrementally, and all the adjustments are made literally by taste.
It's crazy.
It tastes great. So well done.
Thank you.
That's quite a process. Now, are there going to be, I know this is a consistent product, but I know also Dovetail at one point had kind of a very small, 2 for representing like batch number 2 or whatever the case might be. Will there be anything on the bottles that denotes which batch it comes from, or are they going to be completely, not distinct from that standpoint?
The Easter eggs?
Yeah. Or is that a secret? Do we have to find those on our own?
Hold on, is that on the Dovetail bottle? We've had a lot of issues with that. There's an easier way than proof.
I will tell you one TTB, one cola approval story with the TTB, and not, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but we on the Dovetail, as Blake pointed out, we had a number of the release, not the release number, but so which blend it was, right on the strip seal. Right, it was a 1 or a 2, and one of the reps at the TTB denied the cola because there was a 2 or a 3 in it, because it was misleading. And then we're like, okay, we're not trying to fool anybody here, but okay, so we took it off that one. So there is one that doesn't have one. Then we put it back in the next one, and they were fine with it. But with seagrass, if you look at the line between the blue and the green, it's grasses, and then within that there's a little number. If you look very closely, you'll see it.
Little barrel Where's Waldo, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we do that in a lot of our products, and so that we can keep track of it, and so some of our nerdy friends who like to find those things do that too.
We're all a little nerdy, Joe.
I resemble that remark. Come on.
So let's, one of the things, and why we have everyone here, and Bryce and Robin were integral in helping us choose it, was let's talk about probably one of the most fun we've ever had designing a label for a bottle and naming it, and that's called Breaking Barrel. It was a collaboration which was destined to happen, right? Joe, you never look so good, let me tell you.
I didn't realize my ears looked like that. My ears look that funny, so now I'm super conscious of my ears.
I just wanted to know if Tripp came to the office one day and you're in that jumpsuit, like posing for a picture, and
Tripp's like, what's going on here? Joe's madly hiding the cat.
Definitely need that, Joe.
No, that was that was a really fun barrel, and I think that was a fun experience too. And I would just like to, for those watching too, Bryce, Robin, I'm not sure if that was your first barrel pick or not, but what did you think as you went through and tasted the different barrels that we had available to us to choose, and ultimately the one we ended up deciding on?
I really enjoyed it. It's only the second time I've ever picked a barrel. So, and with somebody like Breaking Bourbon, you guys and all your knowledge, especially between the three of you, it was just it was awesome. I think 4 was the right number to try from. All 4 were. I think there was only one that we kind of ruled out early. The other 3 took some time. And this one that we ended up with is just fantastic. I was on the fence between 2, but this one's definitely one I lean towards. And Anyway, I'll let Joe obviously talk about how great it is and what kind of goes into the makeup, but I really enjoyed the experience. So thank you guys. Thank you, Jordan, Nick, and Eric. So
Thank you.
It was really great. It was my first time doing a barrel pick. I had never done one before, and I was actually shocked to get the email saying you've been chosen. I was like, sweet. I have no idea what I'm doing, and it was great. I think the pick that we had that we ended up with, and the one that you all have hopefully is the one that had me at hello, and I knew that because it was the only one of the 4 samples that we had that was empty at the end. And it was like, yeah, this was it. And I will completely admit that I was pretty hardcore on that barrel. I was kind of on the fence between 2, but I think it was more because Bryce is very persuasive on the second barrel, and I can totally see his point on that. But the barrel that we ended up with, as soon as I tasted it, I was like, that is one that not only do I enjoy, but it's one that people who maybe don't really know about bourbon, aren't really sure about whiskey, and are maybe on the fence about trying something interesting. I could hand them a bottle of this and they would be like, that's amazing. And that's really where I wanted to be. And you guys, Joe, Tripp, you guys knocked it out of the park with it. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Robin, you said something really important, I think. And that is, it right away.
Yeah.
If you have to warm up to it to like it, it's not the right barrel. We've tasted thousands of barrels, and it's sort of like you taste one, and it's like yes, no, what do we do with it, and immediate. And that your first response to it is really the right answer. Go with your instinct. Don't try to rationalize anything. And I think that's the advice we give to people on barrel picks. Don't overanalyze it. Taste it and see what hits you right away. Come back to it, maybe let it sit in the glass and open up a little bit, but you'll know the answer. You already know the answer. And that's it. I'm so glad you said that, because it's such an important thing. You don't need to drink a whole 200 ml of it to see if you like it.
Right.
Or 2 bottles.
Exactly. And at the price point we were looking to put that it was going to be, nobody should have to convince themselves like, oh, this is great, because Nick and Jordan and Eric are so good at what they do, and they're really great at reviewing and figuring out which ones they're going to do. And I'm a big fan of all 3 of them. And so I really take a lot of what they say to heart. But I also know that if I'm going to be spending that bottle or recommending a bottle that's going to be over $50 or over $100, it really has to be something that's going to knock my head back and go, I should have bought 10 of these, because I'm never going to have this again. And that's what it did. And it was great. And Bryce was really great at giving his feedback. And I think that I'm thrilled with it. And I'm sorry Blake, I'm sorry you sold out.
I don't think he is.
I like that. Yeah. That was a good thing.
I'm very sorry you sold out.
So what's interesting about this too is, and so we had posed the question to the group ahead of time, which was, what do you want to do as a group with our next barrel bourbon pick or rye? And there were a number of choices. And this particular choice, which we started at from the group level, which there was an overwhelming vote for this particular choice, is it's actually a private blend. So it's not specifically a traditional single barrel, if you think of that. That way, it's actually a blend of multiple barrels in a very small scale. So maybe Joe and Tripp, if you could talk a little bit about that and how this originated in the first place, and what we were choosing from and what people are choosing from with these private blends that you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think it's sort of an interesting experiment. We call these are micro blends. We do tiny blends, and we just start playing around with them. We start playing around with different mash bills and different percentages. This particular one is made up of 4 different whiskeys, bourbons of 4 different ages. It's 15% of 5-year-old, 5% of 10-year-old, 50% of 14-year-old, and 30% of 16-year-old. And so for us, age is irrelevant. Age is another factor, like a mash bill or a barrel. what kind of barrel it is or where it was stored in the rickhouse. It's just another variable. So that's one of the reasons you'll see on our bourbons could be 5 years on the label, it could be 10 years, it could be 16. It just depends what the youngest whiskey is in there. But getting to our objective, and I want to go back to something you said, which is really important. We are really conscious of what we put in the bottle. Like nothing gets in that bottle that we don't think is really excellent. Nothing. And because we're consumers too, and I'm a cheap consumer. If I buy something that's $50 and I don't like it, I feel really irritated about it. I remember there's still one. I paid $80 one time for whiskey that I thought was going to be really good, and to this day I hold a grudge against them because I think it's
What was the name of that brand? What was
This is why you need to go to Breaking Bourbon, Joe, before you spend your money.
I do. I absolutely do. But I think that's really important, and so we take that very seriously. So these blends are all just. Do you want to add anything to that, Tripp, about that process?
No, I think you did a good job.
What I do for a living.
Yeah.
And are you guys seeing a lot of demand with the private blends pick up as you're introducing those into market as comparative to, call it, I guess, the traditional single barrel type of selection?
Yes, and I was telling Nick before we started, we watched the Bourbon Roundtable last night, which I love watching you guys. It's really I feel like I know you so well just listening to you guys. And I think that the point you made about single barrel versus private blends is really important. And you did mention something about us, which is absolutely true. We will blend these and let you taste them versus having people come and blend the product. And the main reason for that is you may not always get to the right answer. And we feel really strongly that it represents our brand, and we want what is out there within our bottle to reflect what we think is really of a really high standard. We don't own the market on having we're not the arbiter of taste, but we do know if things aren't good. And so we have to be really careful, ride that balance. So everything that we put out and everything that we let people pick from are blends that we have tried and think are really excellent.
I think, that's good to know, Joe. And I think because of that, you guys, maybe you don't, but Kevin just had an interesting question. Are there any flavor characteristics when you're looking for those barrels to go in those blends, right? Whether it's the private ones or just barrel bourbon in general, like, are there any defining characteristics that you shoot for that say, yep, this is what I'm looking for when I want it in a barrel, right? Overly oaky, overly rich, earthy, sweet, I don't know. Are there flavor characteristics that you're normally drawn to that you're like, this is what we want?
That's a really good question. And I think that the way I would answer that is we look for a completely balanced experience. What we're going for is a nose profile, and I call it a beginning, middle, and end. We want you to have an experience at each of those stages of the product. And so sometimes we'll blend hard to get the right finish on it, or the right entry, or the right nose. And so more than like a flavor profile, as I mentioned earlier, Tripp and I love sweet things and tropical notes, especially. We love those, and that's in a lot of our bourbon. Fred Minnick always refers to it as the marzipan factor in our product, and there is a lot of it, and there's a lot of that profile in our products because we blend to that, we like it. But really, what's more, I think, important to us is giving that full experience of every level of taste at every different point. I think that's more of our signature. And sometimes now, having said that, in single barrel selection, there are times when we pick single barrels that have a huge finish and then a different nose. And we do those to mix it up. And what was interesting, your experience with 4 different samples is normal. We put samples together. They're not just random. we actually figure out which ones go together and put those together and send those out. And we try to give you a different experience in each of those. And what's going to happen naturally is somebody won't like, a group won't like one. Another group will take that and go, that's the best thing I've ever tasted. So it really, really depends on your palate, what you've eaten that day, what kind of mood you're in. And no, that's how it works. But I just want to say something about this particular one.
Yeah.
So this morning, Tripp and I tasted this again because
why not?
Yeah. Well, actually, we were celebrating just finishing another blend of something. We just finished it. We're like, okay, now what do we do? We just finished it. And I was like, oh, I know. We're going to do this tonight. Let's taste it. And we tasted it, and what happened was we both looked at each other and was like, black cherry. And it was so funny because this barrel, this is what I get on this is black cherry, and just deep black cherry. And we both thought at the same time about this. You want to talk about the honey barrel that we found that time?
Yeah, there was a barrel that Joe and I, as we were picking single barrels, we set aside like, wow, this is just absolutely amazing. And that there is a black cherry. I always think of a black cherry ice cream, and it was so pronounced in that particular barrel, and it was so good. We didn't know what to do with it. We didn't want to put it in a blend because we didn't want to sacrifice the barrel. We weren't real sure, what to do with that particular barrel. And when we tasted this barrel again this morning, we both looked at each other and said, black cherry barrel. And it is incredibly pronounced, and it is a fantastic flavor in this product.
Well, we definitely agree too. And Joe, you're just not saying that because your face is on the bottle this time either, right?
I had nothing to do with it. No, I'm not at all. Nope. You get
it's a great
opinion from us.
That came after. Just full disclosure, that came after the barrel.
Yes, it also was not there during the Seelbach. I feel for legal reasons, I need to throw that out there.
We can't condone it because you can't cover up the mandatory. But we sell it through the distribution channel with the cola that is appropriate to that product, and what happens after you take possession of it is your business. I think it's really a great label.
Well, I mentioned before, part of a series, hopefully, so kind of playing into that whole series, hope to do more. I mean, there's so many great, just the selections you guys offered at first that the group picked from as where do we even want to start this. I want to say there was a really high-aged Canadian rye in there. There were some finished options in there, so definitely some interesting stuff on the private selection path. Can you talk a little bit more about, kind of what you guys have, in the pipeline and available for those private selections?
Sure. We have, taking it from the top, we have private selections. Let's look at rum. We have rum blends that are combination of Jamaican, Barbados, generally, and some Martinique, but generally Barbados and Jamaica. Different proportion blends, different distilleries, different types. And then, so we have some of those that are just straight blends of the rums, and some of those have a finish. And so that's one type of private release product that we have. I love the contrast of some of the rums with Scotch finishes, Scotch barrel finishes, and Scotch casks and casks. For the whiskey private releases, we do about 96 concurrent finishes, ranging from vineyard specific wines to type. We're about to do several Barollos finishes. We do German ice wine, Tokai barrels. We do whiskey and rye barrel finish. We do different. I can't even. I mean, it's like it's. What am I drawing a blank on it? There's 96 different finishes of the whiskeys. On the bourbon private releases, as I mentioned earlier, I think they're all blends of different ages. So there's no finish on the bourbon that we produce on the private releases. There is a finish in Armida, which is why we don't call it a bourbon. It's a bourbon finished in. And that's an interesting product. That's a bourbon finish in pear brandy casks. We sourced that with this West Coast producer of pear brandy, and we've settled on Bartlett pear as the one that we like the best, and so that's a pear conditioned cask with Sicilian Amaro. And what's the third one?
The Madeira.
It is. Why am I drawing a blank on this?
The apricot brandy.
Madeira port.
No, Armida is Jamaican rum cask, Sicilian Amaro, and the pear brandy cask, and those are blended again separately, and then we blend the whiskey separately, and then we blend some of them in the finish, then we blend the finished ones together. It's like a seagrass process. We have single barrels for both BCS and Stellum, bourbon and rye. We have a number of Canadian rye single barrels coming up of different ages, some very old Canadian single barrels coming. And what else in the pipeline? I think that might be enough.
I feel like if you go to the release calendar, we've got like Barrell, and it's all, new different products. You send us that, every so often, and then there's always there's so many. And of course, we're fortunate we get the opportunity to try so many of them. Armida, talk about that for a minute. That's a really unique flavor profile. I think I just going into it didn't know what to expect. And it was like just something I hadn't tasted before. How'd you land on that flavor profile for Armida?
I love that. That's one of my personal favorites. I love it. Well, I knew we had several years ago. We had tasted the pear eau de vie, the pear brandy distillate off the still, and it was 150 something proof, and it was just spectacular. So we knew we wanted to build around that product. We knew we wanted to do something with that, and so that was more than a year, maybe closer to 2 years in development of different ideas, different things we put together, put it aside, came back to it, and we settled on bourbon as being the driver with that one. We knew we had a bourbon in the matrix we wanted to do, but this really worked with the pear. And then the other two components, finishing components, just came out of experimentation. We tried different things. I think I know we tried some. I think it was cognac with that as well. Finish. I mean, there were dozens of different combinations, but this is the one that just really spoke to us. And then we found that buying sourced pear brandy is pretty tricky, because it takes like 1 million pounds of pears to make a glass like this big. And it is literally tons of pears that go into the production of this. And so we have to be way out in front on that and buy it in advance, because then we want to let it. We don't want to use it the second it's distilled, because it takes a little bit of time to settle down, and we've noticed a difference in that. So it's been a great project playing around with getting this thing right, and I'm glad you like it. It's really one of my favorites. Somebody asked a question. Yeah. Okay. Yes, what we do is liberating.
So we're getting kind of close to the top of the hour. Before I forget to mention it, Stellum, you mentioned Stellum before. So obviously a very different look than the current barrel bourbon product. Totally different. And Eric's got the rye there. I've got the bourbon. Totally different look on the shelf. Different price point. I'm finishing up a review of Stellum Bourbon right now. Different flavor profile too, in a sense. I feel like it's definitely different from Barrell. Tell us about that Stellum product and what kind of got you going with even thinking to introduce that to market, and then what that product is.
Good question. One of the things about our company is sort of underlining what we're talking about is we bring products to market very quickly. We're able to pivot. There's no committee. It's yes, no, and we go right to a product if we need to. And with Stellum, one of the things that and we observe. I mean, this Stellum came out of observation of products and observation of the marketplace. And one of the things that's been really clear since we started is the people coming to the market drinking bourbon have really changed. It's really evolved. It's really broad. It has become much more inclusive. It's a deeper cross section of the United States. It's different people, different tastes, different flavor profiles. It's also people are more demanding in what they want. People, literally 10 years ago, the bourbon shelf there wasn't that much diversity on the shelf of product. It was really a narrow set of products. Now the consumers are demanding much more from their products. They want to know more, they want to taste more, they want to experience more. So we set out to really address that. Barrell Craft Spirits, Barrell Bourbon, just the name Barrell, it's about the barrel, it's about the product. Everything is about transparency and visibility. Our bottle highlights the liquid that's inside it. It's all about what we care about is not a backstory that isn't even real or a recipe that isn't real. It's about what we produce and what's in that bottle, and that should stand for it on its own. Stellum is a corollary to that. It's a very simple design, simple packaging. And what's reflected in the packaging is what's in the bottle. It's a more direct, straightforward, pared down, crisp, clean bourbon. It is where Barrell Craft Spirits is multi-layered experience, and that's not to say that this isn't a multi-layered experience, but it's simpler, it's more direct, and this is to me is what bourbon is. This is what bourbon was, and it's just this very direct experience. I hope you liked it. I love this product. I love the flavor. I love the flavor of the bourbon and the rye. It seems like people are responding to it. So I think that we put it in the right place, the right product in the right package. Also we wanted to go at a price point that, at a 55 to roughly competitive price point. Our average price is about 90 for the Barrell Craft Spirits. And we've been gathering these barrels for years. So these are a whole subset of barrels that we've been acquiring slowly over time that allow us to be able to bring the product at a different price point.
Awesome. And I think as more people get a chance to experience it, I think it'll be a nice, nice contrast for when they can't find their favorite barrel release to go after something Stellum has, which is really nice too. And do you have any plans? I know you guys just launched the brand, but do you have any plans in the future for expansion in that area, Joe? Or are you going to try and stick to that classic, just bourbon rye and then the single barrels?
Well, we've been playing around with. We have the bourbon and the rye, which are a consistent product. And we also are doing single barrels at the same price point. And that's been people really, really warmed up to that as well. At this point, we don't have any plans to expand into different, this year anyway, at least for the next 6 or 8 months, into other spirits. We are playing around with some private releases of this, or maybe even a different. Let me hold back on that because if I say it, then it's gonna be when is it coming, and we actually let me leave it at, we have a couple of other products in the Stellum line that we're playing around with, and I don't think they'll come to market this year. It might be next year, or it could be later in the last quarter of this year.
Keep people on their toes. I like it.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is keep an eye on the Breaking Bourbon release calendar where you'll see that first, right?
Was this a setup for that plug? That it was like, hey Joe, if you
page on the internet, I look at it all the time. I love that. I love that feature on your site. I think it's great.
Well, thank you. So one question. So I don't think you did cover it. From Larry Irving. Did I miss the origin of the name Stellum?
Yes, I didn't mention it. Stellum is a derivative. It's derivative of the Latin term for star, and it's one of those things that I'm a Cold War baby. I grew up with the space program. I grew up with the future is outside of this planet, and it just I found it to be really inspirational, and just there's a simplicity to it, and something that I just liked. And we didn't want to do it. It's funny. One of the hardest things of what we do is naming stuff. It's hard. It's hard to name things. And what was easier and more direct and sort of related to things was there's an infinite amount of stars, star systems, planets, things that we can draw from, and some of them have meaning with what we're doing, and some don't. Some we just like the sound of them, and it just was a great vehicle for us to be able to create something that seemed to be simple. So it's like the 2 L's in barrel.
I was going to say it's a cool tie-in. There's the 2 L's in barrel. There's the 2 L's in Stellum, and if you Google Stellum, it's not like you're pulling up other things. You just get the whiskey, which is
let me tell you,
a great thing.
That was impossible. But the one thing that can be pointed out is Stellum is mullet backwards.
Is that actually? You just gave me a great
awesome.
Sticker idea.
Yeah, it's right there.
That may or may not be a release.
Yeah.
No, you have to do it now. I think it's a moral imperative.
So we're coming to the kind of.
It took us a long time to see that it was mullet.
And then you just leave it to the internet, and the internet's like, yeah, it's mullet spelled backwards. I'm like, son of a gun.
Whole new website. I see a new website on April 1, Joe. It's going to launch. It's going to be mullets. It's going to be great.
Maybe the parallel universe.
Yeah.
The upside down,
Business in
right?
the front, party in the back. Come on. It's awesome.
Exactly. So we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Anybody on the chat have any burning questions for Joe or Tripp? Or Blake, too, from Seelbach. I mean, you guys, certainly if you've been in the Single Barrel Club for a while, you know that Seelbach is partner on a lot of our picks. You guys know Seelbach is doing a lot of interesting things as far as, kind of finding those craft distilleries and things like that. And, we're always excited to find new and interesting things, too. So you guys, too, Bryce and Robin, any kind of burning questions for these guys on the chat?
I have a quick question. Obviously women are really getting into bourbon. We're seeing a lot more women into whiskey and bourbon and rye. Have you seen an uptick in your patronage for barrel for women? I know that with the stone fruit, I found that the stone fruit flavors of our pick really spoke to a lot of people who like sangria or the lighter flavors of cocktails, and I do a lot of cocktails. That's kind of what I do. And are you finding a lot of more women are leaning towards barrel because it's offering these variants that aren't necessarily hardcore burning flavors, or you have to be a hardcore bourbon drinker to enjoy it?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So let me tell you what I've observed. I have tasted thousands of people on our products. Literally, because pre-COVID, we would do events. We do a couple events a week, and people taste it. And it was always amazing when a couple would come up the guy would be the bourbon expert, and then they would both start tasting. And the woman would almost inevitably identify different and more flavors. And so I started thinking about that and reading about it. This is part of evolution. I know we're running out of time. It's part of evolution. Women in prehistory times had to taste the food and make sure it wasn't poison. So they developed better senses to figure out and the better ability to parse flavors. And it's really interesting. It's sort of this genetic thing that's I think has been passed down. So how that translates with us is we do find a lot of women drink our products and comment on our products because it's such a wide range of flavors in everything we offer. I can't believe you asked that question. Thanks.
With all the cocktails I make, bourbon is one of the few. Barrel is one of the few bourbons I don't use in cocktails because it's so good on its own. It's so complex. I've tried it in a few cocktails, and it's like it just overpowers. It's so complex on its own. The barrel picks and the blends, it doesn't make sense. So I love your stuff. I think it appeals to everyone, men, women, everyone. Bourbon aficionados, people who just starting into bourbon. So well done, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Huge thank you. Thank you guys for coming on and doing this live chat with us. We've been kind of talking about it for a while here. Been working on this just doing this pick for a while, and a lot goes into it, from figuring out what to do to then making the pick, getting it out to the retailer, getting together for this, getting into the hands of everybody. So, we're seeing kind of that final stage of that whole process. So kind of before we sign off here, and thank you guys, everybody, for a lot of great questions in the chat too. But Joe and Tripp, if you guys want to just kind of let everybody know where they can find you guys and connect with you guys after this.
Instagram Barrell Bourbon, Facebook Barrell Bourbon, Instagram Stellum, Facebook Stellum, website Barrell Bourbon, Stellum.com. It's pretty straightforward.
And
So
of course,
just to be clear, not mullets.com, right?
I checked; it's already taken. As soon as I started, I went and looked, and it's like an air conditioning company in Florida. It's something like it's not what you think it is.
And of course, it's Florida.
Domain a million
Right. Blake's like, that's my neighbor.
exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, you can find Barrell and Stellum in your favorite liquor store. And speaking of one of our favorite liquor stores, Blake, do you want to give Seelbach a plug?
Yeah, definitely. Well, once again, thanks for having me. This pick is gone, but like I said, and I'm not sure if we're live yet, but we do have a lot of cool products coming from Barrell tomorrow. So be posted later this week. We've got some really interesting bottles, some more of the Armida, some more of the Seagrass, some of the private select or private release blends. And yeah, so really excited. Love what you guys are doing. Joe, I was looking in my wrong email for an email from you a while back, and I find like from 2013, and it's like not even a @barrel.com email. It's some other company.
Blodingo.
And, so it's really great to see what y'all have built, and man, it's producing some of my favorite bourbon. So thanks for having me and allowing me to chat.
Thanks, Mike. I meant to mention that too. I was thinking about it, about how we've known each other for a long time. We were both really starting out in this thing, and it was a very different time then from where we are now.
I still have batch 1 in the cabinet. I every so often will get a pull from it, but I'm like, man, it's a piece of history now. I can't just.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll drink some.
Yeah. And speaking as Blake mentioned, this pick is sold out, but if you're interested in more single barrel picks, make sure you check out breakingbourbon.com and head on over to that single barrel club. We have a ton of great picks coming up. We always love working with Joe and Tripp from Barrell, and I think we have some fun stuff in the future planned with those guys. We're looking forward to doing more with them, and along with a bunch of other great picks out there. And of course, make sure you're checking out our daily release calendar too, with updated information where you can find not just our single barrel club picks, but all the great bourbons coming out there. Eric, you want to wrap it up and just give a plug for Breaking Bourbon?
Sure. Well, you kind of did, but we got we got reviews and release calendar and that kind of stuff. So new reviews the rest of the week too. So check it out. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce and Robin and Cole, who hopefully gets a chance to watch this too. This was fun doing a pick with you guys. Certainly, I think one of the ones we deliberated on the most, you know. So we definitely were, had a lot of fun and getting to know each other over a long chat and a lot of tasting. So thank you guys, and thank you guys for joining in on this too.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Bryce. Thank you for being a good partner in this.
Robin, I enjoyed it. So.
Oh yeah, you were great.
Well, thank you. Cheers, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.